Welcome to the Donna Seebo Show. Donna is an international mental practitioner, psychic, award-winning author, counselor, speaker, teacher, and radio television talk show personality. She brings to the airwaves talented people from around the world who share their insights and experiences with you, the listening audience. Now, let's join Donna.
Wherever you are in the world, I hope you are having a magnificent day or evening. We're going to be discussing something that for most people, even if they're in business, that they go, oh, please, do we have to talk about this? And what is it? It is accounting. I have a delightful guest today, Karla Sasser, who is a woman that is very knowledgeable about this subject. Her book, The Friggin Bean Counters, I really love. I think it is awesome because she addresses the challenges within companies, and her subtitle is Navigating the BS-Infested Cubicles of the Accounting Department. And the illustrations in this book are just priceless. They're absolutely wonderful. I want to welcome to the show Karla Sasser. Karla, I don't know how you have survived this. Do you have to use 45 bottles of Clairol every month?
No, it's not quite that bad. There may be some tequila involved at some times. But
Oh, can I relate? Bookkeeping, accounting. This is something that for most people, especially if they're in business, they pull their hair out. But I know individuals, housekeepers, what do I want to say? I'm women that are managing budgets at home, having to do this kind of thing and doing the bookkeeping and making sure that the budget is there. I mean, we all have to do this on one level or another. What I enjoyed about your book is the fact that you went into history, but I want my audience to know a little bit about you because as with so many things in today's world, it is just not making a row of numbers. It is a very complex system, especially if you run a business. Now, you have active CPA licenses in both California and Florida. You're a certified internal auditor. Boy, do people get gray hair over that one. Certified information technology professional and a chartered global management accountant. Your brain cells must be just by the gazillion because here's all of this detailed, oriented, professional positioning that you've put yourself in. You must absolutely adore numbers.
Well, it's a lot more than just numbers. It's more about processes and people. Really, that's what really gets my attention. I love working with the processes, trying to figure out the efficiencies, and making recommendations and seeing businesses improve.
Well, I think that's so important. And boy, I can tell you, and I'm a small business person, so this is something I'm always astonished at the complexity of what it takes to make sure you have all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted. And I'll never forget when I was first introduced to QuickBooks. There was a person that was trying to train on QuickBooks, train the people that were in the class. And I looked at this person, and I could swear he was speaking some alien language. And I have the basics of bookkeeping. And I looked at him, and he was talking about this goes here, this goes there, and I'm just going, all right, let's start from ground zero. Because I'm one of these people that I want to have A plus B equals C. You tell me exactly where this is to go and why it is to go there. That's great. But I find so many people that are teaching this stuff don't get that. Is there a reason for this? Why is it they can't speak in English?
That was really like a brick wall in the face when I was taking my master's degree in information technology. They made me take an accounting class, and a lot of the students I was in class with were really IT professionals, and the class was trying to teach how to prepare financial statements. And why? I mean, I did not need them to understand that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was really my main motivation for the book. I mean, for me as well, it's always easier to embrace new concepts if I understand the why.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back in history, because accounting is very, very old.
Yes,
and I know the earliest records, and you state this in your book, start in Mesopotamia, and they had a particular way. And I have to tell you, I love the artistry in this book. Who did the cartoons in this book? Just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the artist?
The artist is a gentleman named Gary Solomon. I actually found him on Thumbtack, which is a website you can get proposals and projects from. And he's actually local to me, so that made it all the much easier.
Wow.
He does have a website. I think it's gsdstudios.com, and I have a link to it on my website, so you can reach him. And he was just amazing. He immediately got what I was trying to communicate to my target audience.
Well, he does a phenomenal job. It's just absolutely wonderfully refreshing for the eye, because when we're reading all of these points of information that you give, those illustrations complement it just tremendously. Mm-hmm. And you start off with the information about Mesopotamia, and I think this is good. I think people, if they have an understanding of where all of this originated from, this is important, because financial statements are really significant. And if you don't have them done on a regular basis where you really see what is what, you really can drown very quickly if you're running a business or even in personal accounting.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go into the history a little bit. Let's start out with Mesopotamia, and let's do a brief run-up of how money came about and accounting, and go for it.
Okay. Well, the earliest accounting records were found in Mesopotamia, and they were farm records, actually, and if we know our history at all, they were all villagers, individual people keeping track of their crops and their cattle and that sort of thing. So that's when the earliest records were found. And money has actually really existed since then. I mean, if you think of the barter program, when money is nothing but exchanging one thing of perceived value for another thing of perceived value. So money has really always been around, but the actual coins and paper money that we identify with today was actually first conceived in Rome.
Mm-hmm. It's just amazing. Now, I was intrigued. I did not know this, that the Italians of the Renaissance area are acknowledged as the fathers of modern accounting.
Right.
Those Italians were doing it? Gee whiz. And there was a prototype double entry system. Now, if anybody's listening and they go, what are you talking about? Well, a double entry system, why don't you explain what that is? Because there was a Florentine merchant who designed this.
Right. Double entry is for every entry you make in your ledger, you have to have an equal and offsetting entry on the other side of your ledger, which brings us to the basic accounting equation: asset minus liabilities equal owner's equity. And if you think about what that means, it's just everything you owe subtracted from everything you own is actually your net worth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole principle behind the double entry bookkeeping.
So that good, wonderful Florentine merchant named Amatino Manucci in the 13th century started all of this. Okay, so we have him going, and it's just kept on going. Accounting was absolutely necessary because of the trading of goods. You had to know about the sheep, you had to know about the wine, you had to know about all kinds of things, just like we do today. But then we get into the development of accounting and information technology coming into its own. And you start off in the 17th century with Pascal. So tell us a little bit about him.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Blaise Pascal.
Oh, okay. Let's see. He is actually a mathematician. And he, hold on, you kind of caught me a little off guard here.
Well, from what you have written, the Pascal programming language,
right.
And I think anybody involved with computers, if they have any education about them at all, they understand that this was a part of the development of computing language. But I didn't know that it was responsible for the original Macintosh operating system.
That is true.
So that was an eye-opener for me. And then the Leibniz wheel. Who knows about a Leibniz wheel? Well, this is the gentleman that did it. And I was astonished that it was used consistently until the invention of the electronic calculator in the mid-1960s. You know, you don't think of that. When you look at young kids today, they are so used to all of the computerized equipment. They are so used to these systems. They just take it for granted. They don't think twice about it. Here is all of this history in the Friggin Bean Counter book that you put together, which is marvelous. That really gives some insights as to the patternings of progress to get us to where we are today.
Right. And I was actually trying to capture the intersection between technology development and accounting principles and rules.
Well, you've captured that very well.
Well, thank
and
you.
I had no idea that the Scots were the ones that really made accounting a profession. We're all familiar with the Christmas movie Scrooge and the play about him and his accounting and the guy sitting on the high stools, writing everything in by hand.
Right.
Well, this is something that the people of Scotland started all of this, making it a very specific profession, and it was highly respected.
That is true.
That was amazing to me.
And a lot of the first accountants were actually trained attorneys and lawyers.
Oh, now that's scary. All right, so this is something, I'm being facetious, but not really. This is something that really gives pause, but again, we're looking at a time in history. So we've got a computer evolution. There's always someone out there that's going to say, we can do things better. And when it comes to bean counting, and there are libraries filled with old records, all written by hand. I mean, in genealogy, that has been an invaluable resource because they did it with slaves, they did it with anything and everything because they had to account for things.
Right.
But I was not familiar with the arithmometer, or what is it,
Arithmometer.
Arithmometer. Boy, that'd say that 5 times fast. Tell us about this machine and how this began what we call a computer evolution.
The arithmometer was actually the precursor to the computers, and it was the inspiration for them. It was developed during the early modern period.
Well, I find, it's just amazing. Carl Babbage is a gentleman that came in also after this became public. And then he developed what he called an analytical engine.
Right.
And I was thrilled to read about Augusta Ada King, Countess of Lovelace.
Right.
I was surprised that she was an English mathematician. Now, this was at a time in the early 1800s. Women weren't even supposed to think. They were just supposed to look pretty and wear their corsets well.
That's
and
true.
She was brilliant.
You actually caught that she was the daughter of Lord Byron.
Oh, yes. And she's considered the first computer programmer.
Right.
Woohoo, ladies, guess what? You need to know more about Augusta Ada King, Countess of Lovelace. She's quite a gal. So it went on from there. Now, IBM, we all know about IBM, International Business Machines. That's what its abbreviation is. How did they change? What was it that made IBM so significant?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What made IBM so significant?
So significant. Okay, it was actually founded by Herman Hollerith, who was an American statistician and inventor, and he had a contract with the U.S. Census Bureau. He actually developed punch cards that worked in a mechanical tabulator, and it made getting the annual census, the one that is done here in the States every 10 years, more efficient. Because back in the day, back in the 1890s, that was all done by hand. So by the time they got the current census calculated, it was time to take the next one. So it wasn't really valuable information for anybody.
Especially just the sheer volume alone.
Right.
And you'd have to have literally hundreds of people working on those numbers. And, oh, my goodness, what if one made a mistake?
That is true. And nobody would ever know.
No, you couldn't find it. It's like trying to find a penny. It's just, it's just amazing. So when we move forward to 1901 to 1939, things were really speeding up fast, of course.
Right.
We had World War I, and the industrial environment was really going strong. And there is a picture of a Harvard machine called Mark I.
Right.
And that thing was massive. There's a movie, an old movie with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. And I don't know what year it was done in, but it shows a computer room that works with the cards and processing information. I think it was based on that. I think they had that as part of the set because it was actually huge rooms filled with computers, and they had a challenge because they could actually overheat. They were so hot. But this one was amazing. 500 miles of wire with 3 million connections, 3,500 multiple relays with 35,000 contacts, 2,225 counters, 1,464 10-pole switches, and tiers of 72 adding machines. That's enough to make you cross-eyed.
Right. But if you think about it, the cell phone that fits in your pocket has more power than this computer.
That is true. Absolutely true. You also go into how we moved forward. And there's the UNIVAC. That's a term, the Universal Automated Computer.
Right.
But people from around the world contributed to this technological advancement. And you go into the second-generation computers and the third-generation computers. Now, we're in what, the fourth generation now?
You could say that. We're kind of in between the fourth and the fifth generation because fifth generation is going to encompass a lot of artificial intelligence, and we're already beginning to see that with cars that drive themselves and the rise of the machines, and soon we'll all be replaced.
No, I don't think we're going to all be replaced. That's a misnomer. All you have to do is have the computer crash. I guarantee you we're not all going to be replaced.
And it will crash.
Yes, and they will crash, and things do get corrupted and all kinds of stuff. Look at what we're hearing on the news every day. Let's go into that because you make a statement. Old rules never change. They just get more restrictive. Compared to what was done, let's say, in the early 1900s and what we have to do today with accounting, this is a huge question. What are the significant differences?
Between then and now? Really, as far as significant difference, just the regulatory oversight.
What are the biggest regulatory changes that have evolved, let's say, in the last 15, 20 years?
The biggest one that public companies are those traded on a recognized stock market are having to deal with Sarbanes-Oxley, and that is it's the law enacted in 2001 as an answer to, the WorldCom and the Enron crisis, and it requires management to, especially the CFO and the CEO, to certify that they have a system of internal controls in place.
Now, you've been in a positioning of doing audits on companies. Yes. And from what I understand from most people involved in that process, there are very few companies that really have easy, reports to read. That so right. Often there's so much wrong entry, just it's amazing. And many times, and I think of someone that I know that is a bookkeeper for a small business, and this person has been doing bookkeeping for quite a while, and this business owner and he had a successful business, he just did not know what was available, what his losses were. He didn't have any clue about any of it. And when she finally got through with things, he just said, "Oh my goodness, look at this." She said, "Yes, this is where your weaknesses are. This is what you have to improve on. This is what," and she sat down and she talked with him. Well, that's very nice, but you have these big corporations. Look at what's going on in the news. No, non-profit organizations that have not been audited. There's all of this, and you have to dig through this quagmire. When someone is in a small business and they're looking to set up, quote-unquote, their books, what is the first thing you'd recommend if they're ready to hire somebody? Because most people that are running businesses, typically, they're not really trained in accounting or bookkeeping. Right. And so, consequently, it can be really... I'll use the word quagmire. It just makes them a wreck. Right. The biggest thing I would recommend for a person just starting out in business is to make sure you make all your entries in your checkbook. Because if you think about it, your checkbook is a double entry bookkeeping system. And that's how a lot of companies start, with a checkbook. Mm-hmm. Then with the automated systems, and this is very significant, I know that my husband was involved in manufacturing, and he had a good background in accounting and, business, financial reports, etc. And he was able to work very comfortably with what's called an ERB system. Right. And this is quite complicated. This is quite complicated. So as somebody grows with a company and they find their software, and you bring this out pretty much at the beginning of your book, how when you have people that are software developers, they have no clue about how to keep records for, let's say, manufacturing, making sure the parts are all accounted for, waste is accounted for, all of these things. Now, with my husband, he was familiar with that. How does someone go about choosing a software system? That's the $1,000,000 question right there, because you want to make sure it's cost efficient for you, and it will grow with you. So it's really a balancing act. You really have to have your plan in place. You have to have a vision of where you want to grow and how you want to obtain that growth before you can really make a good investment in an ERP system. Very good point. So how can someone, when they're looking at accounting systems, it's like QuickBooks. QuickBooks is not a one-size-fits-all. This is not, but it can be very good for someone beginning a business. But you still have to understand how to work it, how your entries affect different things.
Right.
This is very, very important. What is the best way to go about, working or developing with this? I've been in classes for things like this, and it drives me up a wall because they don't speak English. It just, that's my particular biased opinion. Someone listening to this say, well, boy, you must be a dunce. No, I'm not a dunce. It is, how do you communicate well and effectively the understanding of record keeping? Now, your book does a great job of explaining different scenarios, and it's just terrific. But when it comes down to the basic of everyday record keeping, this is so important. This is so important. How do we get a grip on this? Mm-hmm. How does one get a grip? Where would they go? Would they go to a local college? Would they go to a junior college? Where do you go to?
Well, I would start out by reading my book because I tried to get as much information as possible in plain English as I could, just so anybody reading this could at least have an understanding of what's going on and what questions they need to ask if they don't understand. Because even that can be a challenge when you're talking a Greek language like accounting. Mm-hmm. So basically, for the small business owner, I would recommend maybe partnering with an accountant or even somebody with a bookkeeping background that you can relate to. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And what's the best way? Because you get a lot of people that say they can do something and they can't. What is the best way to find a person that you could talk to about this? Are there particular organizations where people are licensed, where we can go and say, I need to be able to integrate with someone?
Well, every state has a CPA licensing board, and you can go to that state board and find out if the person you're talking to is a license holder, a CPA license holder, and if that license is active, which is something that's really important because an active license holder is required to take continuing education every year or so to keep that license active.
And for an ordinary bookkeeper, and I should not use the word ordinary because bookkeepers have tremendous responsibilities, but
they do, but no, there isn't really one.
Okay, so there's no certification for bookkeepers, period.
Nothing that's nationally recognized that I'm aware of.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We just barely scratched the surface of your Friggin Bean Counters, negotiating or navigating the BS-infested cubicles of the accounting department. I love the illustrations in this book.
Thank you.
I think it enables one to visually get a concept, and then when you're reading the book, you're dealing with details that I think a person has a capacity for being able to absorb. And I don't care what level of business you're in. I think that there is good information on international business dealings, on auditing that you give here, and all of the different agencies, all of the different acts like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 and how it changed so much. It's enough to make you feel like you want to buy an investment in a hair coloring company because of the gray hairs that you're going to get. But believe me, you can get through this if you have a good team. Now, Karla Sasser, this is, again, a wonderful book, Friggin Bean Counters, and that's Friggin Bean Counters. .com is the website you can go to. And if you wanted to get in touch with Karla, she does have a contact space on her website that you could send her a question or ask her about certain things. But this is a book, I think, that could be introduced in high school. And I think it's a great thing if you've got kids that are going to be going to college. boys sit down with this, and they're probably going to look at you and say, hey, I'd rather be out skateboarding or surfing or doing something else, and say, no, this is lesson number 1. You're going to need to learn how to keep records with money. Karla Sasser, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
It's been a delight. Friggin Bean Counters. Yes, it's an unusual title, but if you're in any kind of business, this is something you're going to want to become, well, familiar with. And it's great to share with members of the family, too. And go to frigginbeancounters.com.